Welcome to Fearless with Jason Whitlock. I'm Jason Whitlock, your host. Happy Monday. Thank you so much for joining me. Awesome show planned for you today. I'm going to have some trouble pronouncing one of the names of someone we're going to talk about today, and we'll laugh through and get through that, and maybe you guys will help me out. But we're going to start today's show talking about Stephen A. Smith and his run for the presidency. That's all over the news again, and of course I have more to say about it. Stephen A. did a big interview on ABC. I'll break that down for us. Steve Kim is going to join us in this show. We'll talk a little college football. Here's the name I'm going to struggle to pronounce. Nico Iamaleava or Iamaleava or Nico Iamaleava, quarterback at Tennessee. He's holding out for more money. And Tennessee has kind of said, nope, we're not renegotiating. We were on the hook for you for $2 million. We're not paying you $4 million or whatever it is. Free agency and contract holdouts and spring ball holdouts are now a part of college football. Steve Kim and I will talk about that. We'll also talk about Kyren Lacy, the former wide receiver at LSU, who tragically took his life Sunday, I believe morning or late Saturday night. He was facing negligent homicide or some kind of from a traffic accident that he caused. He was facing charges. I believe this happened in January. He was arrested. I think he was 2, 3, 4 days out from having to appear in court for that. I think he had been illegally speeding and passing people on the highway, and in two cars trying to avoid him, he ended up causing one of them to crash into another car. A 78-year-old man died. Now Kyren Lacy has passed, and a lot of people giving him shout-outs and rest in peace, and I think it's appropriate, but there are some mixed feelings here, and so Steve and I will talk about that as well. But we're going to begin the show where, we begin a lot of shows, or not, I can't say begin, but we talk about this topic a lot. Steve and A. Smith running for the U.S. presidency. Obviously, if you've been listening to this show, we were well out ahead of this before anyone else. But I'm going to unpack that at the beginning, and then we'll get Steve's reaction. Then we'll talk about the QB transfer, the QB shuffle going on in college football, and we'll end with some thoughts on Kyren Lacy, the LSU wide receiver. Before we do any of that, though, I want to tell you guys how you can make your home buying, home selling
process a lot easier, a lot less complicated than my home buying process here in Nashville, Tennessee. I didn't have the right real estate agent at the beginning. I ended up landing with a great real estate agent, but it was a bit of a process, and that's because I had no idea about Glenn Beck's company that he founded and started, Real Estate Agents I Trust. They do the homework for you. They find you a leader. They find you someone that understands the marketplace. They find you someone who can close for you, and they're trustworthy. The name says it all. Real Estate Agents I Trust. It will speed up your buying process, your selling process. It will get you in touch with a real estate agent in your area that you can absolutely trust and who will get the job done. Just go to realestateagentsitrust.com. That's realestateagentsitrust.com. Let them hook you up. Don't be a dummy like me. Get hooked up right off the beginning. realestateagentsitrust.com. All right, back to the meat of today's show. Stephen A. Smith. He's clearly running for president, and he clearly has powerful people backing his run for president. I'm going to play you a couple of clips from his interview on the This Week Sunday morning program. I believe this weekend it was hosted by Jonathan Karl. This is one of these, this is like ABC's version of Meet the Press. Important politicians and newsmakers come on this show every Sunday. This past Sunday, they decided to feature Stephen A. Smith, and Jonathan Karl and ABC and the program This Week promoted this. This is an exclusive interview with Stephen A. Smith. And he's now acknowledging he's leaving the door open to run for president. I want to play you this first clip. It's about 90 seconds, maybe 2 minutes. But I want you to notice while you're watching this clip, look for the editing. Look for signs of editing in this clip where it's like unusual pauses or a little gap. There's two of them in this first. I think this is in the first 2 minutes of Stephen A. appearing on the show. Let's play the clip.
All right, that was Stephen A. Smith, host of ESPN's First Take. He's one of the most, maybe the most listened to sports commentator in America. Lately, he's been talking a lot about politics. And this week, he opened the door to a possible run for president in 2028. So joining me now, Stephen A. Smith. Thank you very much for being here on This Week. So
happy to be here.
We'll get to your possible political future in a second, but you said when Trump got elected, we should give him a chance. How's it going? I mean, what's your take on where Trump is now at day 80 plus?
Well, I don't like what I'm seeing, but I'm not surprised. I mean, this whole tariff war situation is utterly ridiculous. I mean, my attitude is that he should have immediately targeted China and not every nation on the planet, for crying out loud, just throwing tariffs at everybody. Ultimately, he dialed that back, as we saw over the last few days, and folks on the right are up in arms. Basically, I should say, I mean, positively, essentially saying that was the plan all along. There doesn't appear to be a plan. Let's be very, very clear about that. It seems to be a bit very haphazard, and it's just thrown against the wall to see what will stick. But in the end, what you have to applaud them for is for trying something. We're spending about $2 trillion more, than we're raking in. We're losing our credit rating. There's a lot of stuff that's going on in the United States of America financially, economically, that has been, tinkering towards disaster, and somebody had to do something. And so when you look at it from that standpoint, I can understand the need for tariffs, as Senator Elizabeth Warren had articulated. But in the end, what it comes down to is that it does seem to be a bit haphazard right now. And it seemed geared towards large businesses, when we all know small businesses is what makes this country thrive. And I don't see him targeting that nearly enough, but we shall see.
Did you catch it? Did you catch those examples of this clip being edited? I want to make sure, I don't want to leave no stone unturned. Guys know I'm the leader of investigating Stephen A. Smith. Early on, like 30 seconds in there's a little gap where I think Stephen A. and they edited the clip, and it's Kamala Harris type editing. And I just think about that. Stephen A. works for ESPN, which is a Disney product. ABC, a Disney product. that throughout this, I think he was on air maybe 9 minutes. Throughout this 9-minute interview with Jonathan Karl on a serious newsmaker show, at no point, the first question out of my mouth would be, hey, Stephen A., you're a sports gabber. You sit on television and talk about sports nonstop. I'm going to assume to do your show properly, you have to watch sports pretty much nonstop. They're paying you $20 million a year to talk about sports nonstop. Stephen A., given all that, given your job, what you've been doing, how hyper-focused you've been on sports, what makes you qualified to be president of the United States? Why isn't that the first question? Why do they go to, Stephen A., what's your reaction to what Donald Trump is doing? And I know that talking about Donald Trump is a cottage industry, and everybody does it at work. Everybody does it around the office water cooler. Everybody does it on chat boards and on X and on Facebook. But when someone is actually running for president, shouldn't you ask them, like, hey, have you really been paying attention to this? Or are you just like every other person on X or every other person on Facebook who's just posting their opinions based on virtually nothing? And, I hate to sound like the guy I was ripping last Friday, Douglas Murray, but, where are the experts? I mean, it's not to have an opinion about politics or Donald Trump. Anybody, any taxpayer has a right and maybe even a duty to express their opinions about what politicians are doing. But when you step up and say, hey, no, I actually want to grab the steering wheel, I want to direct this country, then that's when I feel like I have a right to go a little bit Douglas Murray and ask myself, you've never been to Gaza? You've never directed anything? I mean, seriously, Stephen A. Smith works at ESPN. He's an employee. It's not like he's run some major company and had 100 people that are direct reports to him, or that he oversees a bunch of people that have direct reports to them. He sits on TV and talks about sports. And now he's flirting with the idea of being president of the United States. This is, I'm going to show you the disconnect. And if you don't get the reference, I was talking about Douglas Murray. He had that interview or that debate with Dave Smith, the comedian, on Joe Rogan's podcast. And he just kept beating up Dave Smith on the point of, like, hey, you have no right to have an opinion on what's going on in American foreign policy because you haven't been to this place or that place. And that argument made no sense. But if someone says, hey, I want to fly this plane, and there's going to be 200 passengers on this plane, you then have a right, and it's just natural to say, have you ever flown a plane before? Have you prepared yourself to fly a plane? Those are legitimate, obvious questions. And I don't understand why people are calling themselves journalists and they keep interviewing Stephen A. Smith without ever saying, like, hey, what are your qualifications for being president? You want to grab the steering wheel. Have you ever driven a car? Could we at least, that's a fundamental, basic question. And I get that later in the interview, Stephen A. will make a passing statement about, hey, someone better qualified than me, and I'm only doing this because people are asking me. I'm only doing this because Donald Trump is so bad and Democratic leadership is so bad. Nah, none of that justifies being completely unqualified, completely unprepared, and saying, I want to fly the plane. And so I'm looking at ABC and I'm looking at Jonathan Karl and I'm looking at them edit a Stephen A. interview to make him sound better and maybe cover up some of his ignorance, because trust me, that interview was edited. There's at least 2 spots in there where they edited Stephen A. Smith. You can hear the gaps. I've got enough experience in this business to see that with my own eyes and hear that with my own ears. But the larger question, or my larger point, is that him being on this show, him being given a softball interview on this show, him appearing on another Disney-owned property and platform is the clearest signal to date that Bob Iger, who runs Disney, wants Stephen A. Smith running for president. And so as the Disney sports gabber who talks on ESPN runs for president, I don't understand why no one in the media has reached out to Bob Iger and said, hey, this is kind of weird. You're paying Stephen A. $20 million to talk sports, and he spends all of his free time talking about, I want to be president. Bob Iger, are you comfortable with this? Or the fact that you've placed Stephen A. Smith on This Week, is that not an indication that you want him to run for president? You want someone who's never been to flight school to fly the plane. Why is that, Bob? These are obvious questions that should be getting asked, and no one's asking them. And that, to me, crystallizes there's a rigged job in place, that there are people of great power and influence at Disney and in the zeitgeist who are propping Stephen A. Smith up, giving him pre-prepared questions, pre-prepared interviews, and edited interviews to try to help him, to try to legitimize his candidacy for president. And so looking at this week interview and how they conducted it and how they edited it, ABC and Disney are completely on board with Stephen A. Smith being a presidential candidate. And when people that powerful, Disney, Bob Iger, that type of, are comfortable and are promoting someone for the presidency, they're generally not doing it because, oh, this has no chance. This is a fly-by-night campaign. And when you're getting this type of cooperation from people in the media, and it's not just Disney and ABC, everywhere Stephen A. Smith has been, including in interviews with so-called conservative, alternative media outlets, they do the exact same thing. There's great synergy among the media groups, whether they're considered conservative, whether they're considered woke, whether they're considered liberal. They all seem to have great synergy around the idea of Stephen A. Smith as a presidential candidate. And so all the people laughing and that'll never happen. Why? Why do you think that? And for all the, oh, Whitlock, you talk about Stephen A. Smith too much. I saw someone over social media call me jealous or call me obsessed. And I'm, as a member of the sports media since 1990, as someone who knew Stephen A. Smith years and years and years ago, why wouldn't I talk about this? It's my job. It would be irresponsible for me if someone that I knew, someone whose career that I followed, someone who has worked with people that I've worked with in the past. I've been at ESPN when he was at ESPN. I knew people at the Philadelphia Inquirer that worked with him. There's so many people in the media that know how unqualified Stephen A. Smith is, just to be a sports columnist. And trust me, there are many people in the sports media business that know Stephen A. Smith's career as a writer, as a sports writer and a sports was a joke. That he was completely propped up by a system that was set up to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion, and to cover for the incompetence of certain people that fit a demographic. Stephen A. Smith, as far as I know, never won a serious journalism award, was never considered for one. He was known as a hack. And I'm not saying that out of bitterness and jealousy. I'm saying it out like, I lived this experience. I know what people think about him. And there are a lot of people like holding their breath and can't believe it. And they think, well, this has got to end. This has got to go away at some point. I'm going to be forced at some point to talk about how laughable and how frightening it is that the major powerful people in America are actively campaigning for Stephen A. Smith as a presidential candidate. If that doesn't scare the death out of sports journalists from my era, if that's not a wake-up call that he's being propped up as a serious Democrat candidate, not just by leftists, but by people on the right as well, if that's not a wake-up call like, hey, man, America and American politics has lost the plot line. We've deviated from reality and moved into delusion and stupidity. I want to play you another clip from Stephen A. that I thought was telling and interesting. But before I do that, I want to tell you guys about why I have incorporated Relief Factor into my daily lifestyle. And it's helping me fight inflammation. It's helping me stay in the gym, get the exercise I need while I'm sweating off the calories from my 1 meal a day diet, in conjunction with the dietary steps I've taken, the exercise steps I've taken, and now implementing Relief Factor into my routine. I'm seeing incredible success. I'm in a lot less pain, and it's not just me, it's my friends. I've shared with you all that Jeffrey Steele, the country music writer and singer, legend, Hall of Famer, bikes 30 miles a day. The guy's 63 years old. And he shared with me, Relief Factor is his secret weapon in staying really active. If you're compromising your life or surrendering to the aches and pains that you think, oh, it's just because I'm old and I just got to live with this, I just got to deal with it. No, you don't. For just $20, everybody listening to this show has access to $20. You got an extra $20. Roll the dice. And this isn't much of a dice roll because 70% of the people that try their 3-week quick start, which is just $19.95, 70% of those people circle back and re-up because Relief Factor is delivering results for them. Call 1-800-4-RELIEF. That's 1-800-4-RELIEF. Or visit relieffactor.com. All right, let me return to Stephen A. Smith. I want to play you this second clip of Stephen A. Smith, and I'm playing it because I'm not going to show you the Steve Bannon clip from his appearance on Bill Maher this weekend, but they reference the Bill Maher Steve Bannon clip where Bill Maher in a conversation with Steve Bannon makes a passing reference to Stephen A. Smith as an alternative presidential candidate for the Democratic Party. And I see it, and I just sit there and go, even Steve Bannon. And like, what am I missing? What am I not seeing? But even Steve Bannon. And maybe there's part of me is like, okay, is the America First movement, are they trying to bait the Democrats into running a clown for president? Maybe that's what it is. But everybody's taking Stephen A. Smith seriously, and I just don't understand it. And so Jonathan Karl set up a question with Stephen A. Smith referencing Steve Bannon's reference of him on HBO this weekend. Let's play the clip.
You know, I saw you mentioned Bill Maher. I saw Steve Bannon was on with Bill Maher, and he was asked what Democrats he worries about. And you know, the only name he mentioned as a Democrat he'd be worried about. So are you really Are you really thinking about running for president? Is this something you think?
Listen, I have no choice because I've had elected officials, and I'm not going to give their names, elected officials coming up to me. I've had folks who are pundits come up to me. I've had folks that got a lot of money, billionaires and others, that have talked to me about exploratory committees and things of that nature. I'm not a politician. I've never had a desire to be a politician. I just signed a contract extension with ESPN. I am very, very
pretty
happy
good one, too.
With my day job. I'm very happy with my bosses. It's a pretty damn good one. Just right. It's a pretty damn good contract. I couldn't be happier. But here's the reality. People have walked up to me, including my own pastor, for crying out loud, who has said to me, you don't know what God has planned for you. At least show the respect to the people who believe in you, who respect you, who believe that you can make a difference in this country, to leave the door open for any possibilities 2 to 3 years down the line. And that's what I've decided to do. But again, whether it's Governor Westmore, who I know, or Governor Josh Shapiro from Pennsylvania, who I know, Andrew Cuomo, who I had the pleasure of interviewing, who's trying to get back in things, be the next mayor of New York, etc. I see a lot of people that obviously and clearly are more qualified than me. But in the same breath, when you think about what Trump is getting away with, when you think about what you brought up about Steve Bannon, who's trying to be slick because he's looking at a non-political individual like myself, looking at me as a populist. But you better be careful what you ask for, because some of the stuff that Trump and the right has been trying to get away with, like circumventing the 22nd Amendment of the Constitution, talking about how there could be a third term. Excuse me, be careful what you wish for, because if any GOP member, if any Republican supports that, I don't want to hear a word out of their mouth ever again about the following the Constitution, the Constitution, the Constitution. That's what they've been living off for years. And then you're talking about circumventing the 22nd Amendment, and you think that's cool? No way. That's not something that we should stand for. So I would hope somebody else would step up that's more qualified than me. But if it has to come down to me, it is something I would consider. Yes, I would, because I don't mind the thought of tussling with these folks at all, on the left or the right. All of them disgust me, to be quite honest with you.
So you see the setup, the referencing of Steve Bannon to add to credibility, and that's what they've been doing, having conservatives reference Stephen A. Smith, treating with a level of respect. There's this buildup of Stephen A. Smith by conservatives. There's clearly a buildup by leftists, even Hakeem Jeffries, Speaker of the House, or Minority Speaker of the House, I believe, hyping up Stephen A. Smith. Both sides hyping up Stephen A. Smith. This is intentional. But then listen to Stephen A. Smith try to bring God into this. Like, what he's doing has something to do with God. You never know. My pastor told me you never know what God has in store for you. Really? Really? God has it in store for America that someone who knows nothing about politics, hasn't prepared to be in politics, supports abortion, the LGBTQIA+, supports any and all of that. That's what God has in store. This is God's plan for Bob Iger and Disney and all their movies that are, particularly the ones directed at kids, that are trying to sexualize and manipulate kids and cause gender confusion in kids. That's who's backing you. And somehow this is God's plan. God, your pastor said, God, you never know how God plans to use you. This is incredible. And I listened to Stephen A. Smith's conversation about this, and I was like, this man's not serious. He's not taking any of this serious. That I'll get in there and I'll tussle with anybody. This, what are you talking about, man? Politics, it's a blood sport, man. Presidents get killed. We just saw our current president survive several assassination attempts. And I'm supposed to believe that some $20 million a year sports bloviator wants to jump into that arena Stephen A. is so full of conviction and moral clarity, and he's so backed by God, and he's so patriotic and so believes in America that he's willing to jump into the hottest fire that America has to offer, American politics. It's a blood sport. It doesn't make sense unless the true puppet masters have found the right useful idiot who's so full of ego and so in debt to them that he would jump into this fire completely unqualified, completely dependent upon them. Now, he couldn't identify 90% of the countries or continents, countries in the world, on the planet. Couldn't set them up on a map, but he wants to be the leader of the free world. And he's already said this and indicated this, but he's like, I'll get up to speed and, I'll surround myself with enough people that, can help me think these things through. He's going into this process saying, I'm incapable of having my own thoughts on any of these serious issues. And so I'm just going to completely rely on whatever experts they put around me, and then I'll just do what they tell me to do. He won't have any of his own instincts. We don't know what Stephen A. Smith truly believes about anything. All he's offered up is Trump is bad, but I'm not going to talk to him in a bad way, but Trump is bad. And the Democrats, they are soft or they are weak. I don't have any policies. There's nothing driving me to do this because here's what I want to bring to America. I mean, just Trump, like him or not, hey, man, I'm going to bring manufacturing jobs back. I'm going to restore the dignity of the working class through policies that provide them manufacturing jobs, and we're going to make America great again. We're going to take it back to the days of, happy days and just, when people that didn't want to go to college could earn a good living, provide for their families, and help their families move up the economic ladder. And, if I have to impose tariffs on all these countries, we have trade deficits in order to get some manufacturing back here, that's what I'm willing to do. I've got an America First philosophy. All I care about is America. Stephen A. Smith is considering to run for president, and he's going to figure out what he's for later, because all he's for at the moment is, hey, I don't like Trump. And then I'm pretending like I don't like leftists. And so I'm a centrist. That's his big policy. Centrist first, I guess, is what we would call it. This is a psyop, and it's a dangerous one. And it says something about the system that we built in this country that a clown like Stephen A. Smith would be considered a serious presidential candidate. This is frightening. We'll bring Steve Kim into the conversation. We'll talk about Nico Iamaleava. Maybe I got it right that time. The quarterback for Tennessee that wants to renew his contract, and Tennessee's drawn a line in the sand and said, no, you're not. We're not doing that. We'll talk about that and what that means for college football, and we'll talk about Kyren Lacy, the LSU wide receiver, former LSU wide receiver that committed suicide shortly before having to appear in court for his role in a negligent homicide in a car accident. We'll do all that next. Men, it's time to rise. Our country, our faith, our future, all under attack. I'm bringing the boldest voices to Nashville. Woke Call 3.0 is your call to action. Join me, join Tucker, and let's take a stand together. May 2nd and 3rd in Nashville. I am Jason Whitlock, your host.
Went without so that he could give you an abundant life.
Young men shall utterly fall. Jason, I know you called us to preach off, but I feel like preaching up in here right about now.
From legendary steaks to classic comfort food, bring home the exceptional handcrafted flavor and convenience of Omaha Steaks. Omaha Steaks offers unrivaled quality and variety. Every bite is backed by their 100% guarantee. Every steak is perfectly aged to maximize tenderness and hand-cut by master butchers in America's heartland. Grass-fed, grain-finished. Beef has more marbling for exceptional flavor and is the choice of steakhouses and professional chefs around the world. The fan favorite, filet mignon, has earned the coveted distinction of USDA certified tender. Guys, I have this in my own home. Omaha Steaks been kind enough to hook me up. It's what I eat here in my own home. Love it, the fillets, love all the comfort food. Occasionally, again, I'm just on one meal a day. I'll eat a little of the French fries, all of it. Awesome taste. 5 generations of uncompromising quality backed by an unconditional 100% money-back guarantee if you don't like it. Omaha Steaks. Go to omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide, and for an extra $30 off, use my promo code FEARLESS. That's omahasteaks.com, my promo code FEARLESS for $30 off and 50% off site-wide. omahasteaks.com, promo code FEARLESS. I've struggled with my health and weight loss most of my life, feeling sore, low energy, and having a hard time staying mentally sharp. But Relief Factor, it's changed all of that. I feel better, I move better, I think better. It's been a real transformation. And here's the thing, it's only $20 to try. If Relief Factor works for me, and I'm no easy case, it can work for anyone. Don't wait, call 1-800-4RELIEF or visit relieffactor.com.
모두 다 빨리 박수 쳐 기다리지 말고 서둘러 Reason that I'm back is to feed you raps I see that you are 배불러 So fly.
All right, welcome back. Time for some Korean co-sell. Steve Kim, Stephen A. Smith's bid for the 2028 presidency continued this weekend on This Week with Jonathan Karl, ABC's version of Meet the Press. Obviously, I'm not a fan, but obviously I think when you're getting on these type platforms and they're lobbing you softballs, the fix is in. ABC, Disney, Bob Iger clearly want this to happen. Your thoughts?
My thoughts. You know, one of the worst movies that I ever saw, and I regretted wasting 2 hours of my life sitting through it. Remember Bulworth? Remember that?
Bulworth, no.
It was about some political candidate that was kind of a farce, and it became this big... This is what it feels like. Real-life Bulworth, and it's a bunch of bull... I mean, I'm just thinking about this whole situation. Has he declared what party he'd run for? Is it going to be the fake conservative that's going to back down every time he gets heat? Or is he just going to run on an I'm not Trump campaign? Because I'm trying to figure that out. If you want to be a campaign or a guy that's going to be a candidate, you need to have a platform and a campaign that you're going to run on. And this is a guy that has consistently said things that everyone applauds. And then invariably, when he gets heat from a certain group of people, 3 days later, he backtracks. So, I mean, again, is he conservative? Is he Republican? Is he liberal? Is he Democrat? He is a chameleon, but I'm just telling you, watch that movie. This is real life Bulworth.
I think I do vaguely remember that movie, but it's pretty old. But yeah, I do think his, and literally you picked up my point in terms of, I don't know what Stephen A. stands for, and I don't think he knows what he stands for beyond I'm not Trump. And, it's like Obama had hope and change, and Stephen A. Smith will have I'm not Trump.
Say what you want about Donald Trump. And I know there's certain segments of the country that no matter what he does, no matter what the result is, they're just not going to like him and in turn root against America. But what I do like about him, and I am someone that voted for him and I'm enjoying what's going on, he is executing his agenda for the most part. Whatever he said to us for the prior 18 months to 2 years, he's doing. So I kind of know, like, this is what we're voting for. This is what we wanted. This is what we're getting. And at least I am going to look at it over the course of time and be patient. With Stephen A. Smith, you're literally going to get a guy that's going to bloviate, promise, make bold declarations, and then invariably he's going to check his Twitter, and a certain demographic is going to be very angry at him, and then he's going to come back a few days later. Well, let me just tell you, I didn't mean it like that. And I'm going to be like, okay, Stephen A., you're trying to please everybody, which really means invariably you please nobody.
I think it's a tiny bit even worse than that, because I think Stephen A. is making it clear, I have no platform. I have no agenda. I'm going to do whatever my handlers tell me to do on every position. And it's not, he's not someone with his own instincts, with his own, like, hey, here's what I stand for. Obama, like, hey, I believe in healthcare and rechanging the healthcare system and the Affordable Care Act and blah, blah, blah. There was something he was trying to stand for and accomplish. With Stephen, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what he's like a male version of Kamala Harris, because and maybe he's just a reflection of the whole Democrat Party, because maybe they don't stand for anybody. They just want someone that will bloviate and draw attention to what it is they're doing rather than actually standing for anything.
Well, look, I don't know who that's a bigger indictment of or insult of, Kamala or Stephen A. I mean, seriously, one that at least had a somewhat of a political career and had some sort of requisite experience, right? Say what you want. But the issue then becomes with Stephen A. Smith, and I just can't get around this. Jason, he gets a lot of credit for basically saying, think about this. The Democrats were a terrible party, and Kamala was not a great candidate. Okay, that's like saying, well, God, this guy really knows the Philadelphia Eagles in football history because he said Rich Kotite was not a good coach. Right, so think about this. So not only is he getting crowned for being Captain Obvious, but at the same time, he will then tell you, or he told you for about a year, that he wasn't going to vote for Trump for one reason, because it was Trump. So that's who you really want as the leader of the free world based on those qualifications. Okay.
So let's say, particularly people of my age, and even people as young as yourself, slightly younger than me, but all of us in the sports media of that era, it was pretty much universally understood that Stephen A. Smith was a hack. Now, I'm just telling you, it's like he could bloviate on TV, but he was a hack. It's not like he was winning any journalism awards. It's not like he was writing anything of any great substance or depth. He was a hack that broke some Sixer stories because he worked a relationship with Allen Iverson. So there's all of us in this 50 to 65-year-old range in the sports media that know, like, would have to sit here and go, hey, America's crazy. The hack that we all talked about behind his back, laughed at, some of us talked about openly, is being pranced around and being talked about on major networks and major media platforms as a presidential candidate. Am I the only one, me and you, that are going to stand out here and call it out, or are other people going to join in at some point?
Well, Jason, I really actually kind of want this to happen. I really do, because I think it's going to be fascinating and it's going to give us a lot of content, because when he starts to get on the debate stage and has to campaign and actually really express, what do you believe in? How are you going to govern? What is your platform? What is your plan? Oh, I'm just telling you, Saturday Night Live, if they weren't so pro-leftist, would have a decade's worth of material. Okay, every stand-up comedian, every social commentator should be begging for this to happen. Jason, let me reference something. And we're not that far apart in age, okay? But I remember growing up reading about how Howard Cosell, who I wear this jacket in honor of, it's not a Hall of Fame jacket, it's supposed to be an ABC Sports blazer for those who don't know. There was talk of him running for some sort of office or getting into politics, and he actually considered it. Now, say what you want about Howard Cosell. Look, he could be pompous, he could be arrogant, he could be self-centered, but he was highly intelligent. I believe he was a lawyer. He probably could have made a living doing that, but he instead became this larger-than-life, iconic television personality. But you also knew that there was a level of seriousness to him. Like, he could hold a conversation on various issues. In fact, he thought sports was beneath him at a certain point, and that was part of his arrogance. When you see a Stephen A. Smith, I think even his biggest, most ardent fans would be like, yeah, I'd love to discuss what Allen Iverson was like, the relationship with Larry Brown, the state of the NBA, who did he like, Jordan or LeBron? But I don't know how many people go up to Stephen A. Smith saying, Stephen A., so that situation in the Middle East, man, it's pretty deep, isn't it? Like, there's no one going up to him with those type of questions, at least in my opinion.
Well, look, if someone went up to Stephen A. Smith and said, hey, what's going on in the Middle East, he would probably say, well, I mean, the Cowboys with Dak Prescott and the Eagles with Jalen Hurts, that NFC East is going to be pretty competitive. The middle of the East, I don't know. He has no idea. He couldn't spot any of these places on a map. This is and I say this in all seriousness, there's not an ounce of hyperbole in what I'm saying. I'm not trying to be snarky. Stephen A. Smith's bid for the presidency is the most fascinating thing I've seen in my 35-year history of involvement in the sports media. I don't know. I don't even know anything else that would come close to rivaling. I don't know if there's any real media stories.
Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, as a Californian, I'm not proud to admit it, but wasn't he elected by our fine people not that long ago, 20-some-odd years ago?
And he went from basic bodybuilder to governor. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, right. And by the way, right now, I would love to have Arnold Schwarzenegger back in lieu of who we have. So we actually went downhill from Arnold Schwarzenegger. Just think about that.
You've given me, seriously, something to think about there in terms of Arnold Schwarzenegger, before becoming governor, all he really had on his resume was, I was a bodybuilder, and then
I'll be Bach.
Maybe in some movies.
In movies. He was an A-lister. I'll be Bach. Yeah. He won. I couldn't believe it. Think about that.
Well, I mean, that's a point in Stephen A. Smith's favor. Boy, you just have made another argument why people need to quit laughing this off like it couldn't happen. Crazier things maybe haven't happened, but they've, Arnold Schwarzenegger. I have to think about that one. Yeah, they'd have. Let me move on to this Nico. Oh man, Iamaleava.
No, Iamaleava.
Anyway, Tennessee. I'm done trying to. Luca's about to try to tell me how to do it. I'm done. Nico, the quarterback at Tennessee. I think they said, wasn't he getting like $2.6 million? He wants $4 million. And Tennessee, Josh Heupel was like, nah, we're not renegotiating, deuces. What's your initial reaction to the way Tennessee's handled this? What does this say about college athletics and where it's moving forward?
Oh, I'm absolutely stunned that you didn't go out there and pat yourself on the back, Whitlock, because you're very adept at that. With these words, I told you so. Because quite frankly, Whitlock, to give you credit, you told us so. And this is where the NIL has gone nil and void. And I keep hearing the phrase inflection point, as if somehow this will be the point where now sanity reigns. But to back up, Jason, I remember when Iamaleava got the deal. It was supposed to be $8 million. And I'm thinking, wow, over the course of his career, this kid basically made generational wealth at age 18. Now, everyone thought that was nuts. But what happened was the market changed, and not for the better. And when it came to the overall structure of college football, where quarterbacks coming off, I would say, mediocre years like Carson Beck at Miami are getting 4. That's why he wanted to renegotiate. But this is what happens when you go into something that seems to be utopia without any guardrails. And Jason, I find it amazing that people are trying to compare this to, well, coaches do this all the time. They do not. They don't hold out and say, well, if you don't pay me more money, I'm not coaching the next game. They may leave jobs at the drop of a hat, but they don't do it in this way. I'm actually stunned that it turned out this way, but I really shouldn't have been. A couple of years ago, Miami had a situation with Tyler Van Dyke where after the spring game, spring practice had concluded, and we're thinking, okay, that's our team going into next season. He was linked to Alabama, and he leveraged a better NIL deal going into that season, coming off a very mediocre one. So there's so many things to be said. I think that Tennessee had no choice but to cut bait, because if your quarterback acts like this, he has lost the ability to lead men or young men. And once he didn't show up to practice, according to Coach Heupel, that was the end. I thought Josh Heupel handled this very correctly. He was gracious as he had to be. But I love this term, and I don't know how long he's going to be able to say it, but nobody is bigger than our power T, including myself. So I hope it's an inflection point. I hope this is ground zero for this whole NIL transfer era. But you know what, Jason? At this point, I'm just a full-blown cynic.
I want to read a couple of tweets from Joel Klatt. The first one is, I do find it interesting that Tennessee created this void in a sense when they fought their infractions surrounding NIL, which led to the NCAA sending a memo to their members basically saying there is no enforcement. This broken system must be fixed, and the path is a CBA. So that's one Joel tweet.
Yeah.
Let me read a second Joel tweet. NIL and the XFR portal did not ruin college football. The pathetic and inept NCAA not enforcing rules is threatening to ruin college football. So we need a governing body to step in and enforce mutually agreed upon rules. It is really that simple. Let me read one more from Joel to get his full thoughts in context. Here's the last one. This Tennessee Iamaleava situation is wild and yet totally predictable. Of course, this was going to happen when there are no guardrails and rules to govern the business and movement of sports players. You may not like what Nico is doing, but it is certainly his right. So
Okay.
That's Joel covering all the bases, in my opinion. But this has synergy with what we're going to be doing on this show in the middle of this week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I think all of professionalized sports, professional sports, are at an inflection point and need some sort of reset. And so Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Jay Skapatak's going to be in town, and we're going to talk about how to revamp the NBA. And I'm calling it the Great NBA Reset or the Great Reset NBA. But same thing, college football, professional football, all of these professional sports to me need a great reset and a do-over. Let's just deal with the college football aspect. This is where, I don't think name, image, and likeness is a sustainable, fair system that will service the athletes. I don't think it'll service the athletes. I don't think it'll service sports fans. The athletes will make money, a handful of them, but it's money that I do think eventually is going to harm them. It's going to compromise their educational system, and it's clearly hurting college football overall. But Joel is kind of letting NIL and the transfer portal off the hook. Do you?
Well, let's make this clear, and I said this to you before. The NIL was supposed to be about that popular, iconic player, whether it's their jersey number or the baggy shorts of the Fab Five, Tim Tebow's number 15, or players can create their own merchandise or get a local car dealership to say, hey, we want to use your name, image, and likeness and give you an endorsement deal. What it morphed into quickly was pay for play in the guise of these collectives. Every major program has a bunch of group of boosters that pay into it. And in essence, every program now has their own salary cap. And they ask you for donations because they're basically saying, hey, if you want the talent to stay or to come, you got to give in. It's not just your ticket money anymore. It's just not your yearly dues. You got to give to the collective. All right. So that right there, right off the top, was ruined because it became pay for play. Now, the transfer portal. Jason, I've said this to you for at least a year. All you really had to do was to keep in place this one rule. If you decide to leave your program, you sit out 1 year. I think that alone would curb a lot of the movement for two reasons. Number one, these young kids have no patience. They want to play immediately. And if the kids are being poached, which a lot of them are, with the inducement of quote unquote NIL, teams aren't paying for you to redshirt. They want you to play immediately. So again, the lack of guardrails really, I think, was one of the big problems here because the NIL is not being used the way it's supposed to, and the transfer portal is now being abused. And Jason, I'll just end it like this here. There is no difference between college and pro football, except pro football has more rules. Players are under multi-year contracts, so everybody knows these amount of players, their contracts are expiring, and we're going to make a decision whether we're going to pursue them as free agents. In college football, Mario Cristobal said it himself last week after a practice. He said, bottom line is this. Every player is really a transfer portal guy. We just don't know it yet, and neither do they. That's the reality.
Well, I'm going to tell you why he's even more right than that. He knows it every day.
Yes.
That's a transfer.
Yes.
Because he's always constantly recruiting the guy, trying to keep him out of the transfer portal.
Yes.
So the recruitment and the butt kissing never stops, and the coaching and the nurturing and the development never really begins. They're PlayStation players. They're NFL or franchise mode of college football. That's all they are. And so I just there has to be a comprehensive overhaul of everything they're doing. That they're, Steve, I don't know if you were this way, but a lot of the enjoyment I got from college football was the high school recruiting process.
Yes.
That was a big signing day was a big deal. And then you get at Ball State, we got this 3-star kid that was maybe going to go to Iowa, but he came to us. And then you watched him develop for 3 or 4 years. And and now when we get a Carson Steele, the running back for the Chiefs, we know what we're only going to have him for a year or two, because as soon as he
get poached,
becomes a great player, he's going to get poached. And so I don't enjoy college football, Ball State, the way that I used to. And I think the same thing is going on at other schools, even the big schools. You don't get part of the love and passion you develop is watching the guys develop and feel like you were a part of that process. You watch the kid grow up. They just go from school to school to school.
I've said this to a few major boosters at Miami. I said, if they have no loyalty, we should not be bound to them either. And my view is this, Jason. If you're at XYZ college and you fulfill your academic requirements and you exhaust your eligibility and you finish up as a Miami Hurricane, I really think that the boosters, if these young men ever need help, need a referral, need help getting a job, they fall on tough times, we got to be there for them. They're one of us, right? I'm sure you feel that way about Ball State. But I've said if these kids transfer out and they went to 4 different schools, I don't want to be this cold-blooded, but this is the way it works with me. Blood in, blood out. If that kid called me, I'd be like, yeah. Right, yeah. You know that guy that you called that recruited you to the other school, call him. Click. Loyalty has to be a two-way street. It really does. And Jason, the National Letter of Intent Day used to be in the first week of February, and it would be a day, it'd be like a national holiday. I mean, you try to scour. Before the internet, I used to go to the library and get that Sunday's edition or that week's edition of the Miami Herald from the Montebello Public Library, because they used to do a big spread, and it'd be the only time I ever stole anything. My heartbeat was racing. I thought I was stealing the Declaration of Independence from a museum, right? Well, now that it's in December, and then they have a second one, but there's a reality to this. I understand which of these guys is going to even be here in 3 years, much less 5. The other thing that I'll expand upon more. Yesterday was the spring practice game or spring game for a lot of colleges, including Miami. That used to be this important kind of like this holiday for every college football fan that, hey, we get some football, we get some updates on our team, and now we know this is our team going into next year. So let's start setting the DNA. You start doing the research. You start to really like your team. You start talking yourself into saying, if that kid gets better, we can go to the national championship. Now, there's another spring portal window. Jason, you know that there's another portal window beginning in about 3 days? So this is what happens. Number one, teams are not even doing games anymore. It has nothing to do with injuries. They don't want to give remember the Sears catalog, Jason, as a kid? The greatest thing ever. Oh, my God. I mean, as a kid, I used to look at that thing, and I look at all these things as an Asian parent were never going to get me. I just kept getting a calculator and, notebook. That is just terrible. But anyway, you look at all this great stuff, and you're like, wow. Teams do not want to give out the Sears catalog because if you televise the game, your own players are going to leverage you and say, hey, I got 3 calls. What can you do for me? So now there's 2 things that happen. You can't even enjoy the experience because you understand there's going to be about at least 5 to 10 kids that you see on that field on Saturday or yesterday. They're not going to be in your program. You're actually shopping to upgrade your roster. So there's so many levels to this that have been eroded. And I just wonder, and Josh Pate talked about this on Sunday night, how sustainable is this?
When you talk about spring games, the kids see that as tape, that they can go shop to other schools. Here I am in the spring game, blah, blah, here's what I can do. It's a shopping cart or it's a shopping menu that they use. The only group that is served by this current system.
Agents
and
parents.
Yes, the agents. Because I guarantee you Nico or whatever his name is, his agent is sitting there and look, hey, I got a little small window to make as much money as possible off of Nico, or some other agents in Nico's ear. If you switch to me, I can get you this deal or that deal someplace else. The agents love this. They love the chaos. They love the transfer portal. They love the opportunity to create multiple windows for them to renegotiate.
Well, Jason, this is the reality of the portal window for most of your really solid players. If you think any of them just decide to transfer on the deadline date, you're incredibly naive. And I was naive like this for a while. These guys are already being poached for months at a time, with their agents reaching out to other schools saying, hey, if XYZ player would be available, how much interest do you have? So these teams already know who they might lose. They already know who they're going to pick up. Now, as it relates to Nico Iamaleava, this is the thing that was puzzling to me. If you really break down his play, and I watched a lot of his games. He's a local kid. He was the #1 player in the country out of Downey, California. Jason, he didn't even throw for 3,000 yards. He didn't even throw for 20 touchdowns. And in fact, 11 out of his 19 touchdowns came against Tennessee, Chattanooga, UTEP, Vanderbilt. I watched several games. This kid could overthrow the Empire State Building and the Sears Tower. I have never seen a guy miss so many open shots. And in my view is this. If you cannot thrive in that quarterback-friendly offense of Josh Heupel, I don't know how much value you really. It's one thing if he would have played like Keith Schuler in '93 or Peyton Manning. I actually think Tennessee would have said, you know what, young man, we want to keep you happy. $4 million, you know what, you're worth it. The fact he was so mediocre, the reaction of the Tennessee fans, you'd be surprised. Some of them actually aren't that upset. And I'll disagree with Joel Klatt on this. Yes, I guess in theory he had the right to do that. But the manner in which he did it, Jason, where he was literally at a position group dinner at the quarterback coach's home and then doesn't show up. I'm sorry. There's still a right way to even do the unpopular thing, and he did not do that.
Finally, Stephen, I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this, but it just crossed my mind, and I want to ask. Arch Manning, I guess, is leaving Texas and going to Ole Miss.
No, he's not.
You don't believe that?
No, I think that was I think you fell for an April Fool's meme.
Oh.
But it is interesting, Jason, that 2000.
Thank you for correcting me. Thank you.
Well,
I apologize.
April Fool's, by the way. That's a retroactive April Fool. But, Jason, the 2023 top 10 quarterback list, Malachi Nelson, there's a kid that was Jaden Rashada. Now, this is an interesting story. He was actually agreed upon with Miami for, I think, a $13 million NIL package with Miami. Well, guess what? His father leveraged a better deal with Florida. Guess what? He's on his fourth program now. He was just better off taking that bird in the hand instead of two in the bush. Out of the top 10 quarterbacks from that class, 9 of them are no longer at that school, Jason. There's actually a belief in college football. You are better off poaching an upper-class quarterback like a Cam Ward instead of developing a guy from scratch, because the reality is he's either going to outperform his contract and hold you to the gun, or he just might be a flat-out bust.
That's interesting. Finally, Steve, Kyren Lacy, former LSU wide receiver, was involved in a car accident. His car escaped damage, but he caused 2 other cars to crash out. One of them a head-on collision. 78-year-old man passed away. I believe that case was going to a grand jury in the next 2, 3, 4 days. And, apparently the kid takes his life. It's obviously a sad story.
Yeah.
But given the circumstances of what was ahead of him and the negligent homicide that he was involved in, what is the proper reaction? I say a lot of LSU and former players and the school all want to be respectful, and they know the young man, and I can't judge someone by one action, but when it is a action that tragic, what do you think of the reaction?
Jason, there's so many ways. Number one, anytime a young person loses their lives, it's tragic. Look, when someone dies in their 90s, I always say, wow, what a great run. That must have been a long, fulfilling life, hopefully. I'd never look at things like that as a tragedy. But when a young person of that age passes away under any circumstances, I do use that word tragedy. But you go back last year, when you look at all the preview magazines, you do all your research on college football, Lacy was next in line for that vaunted lineage of LSU receivers. I mean, he was thought of as an all-American type of player. He was going to be the next Jefferson, the next Jamar Chase, and he had a lot of tools. But this is what I do remember about him, that in that opening game in Las Vegas, Labor Day weekend, if you recall, Jason, I don't know if you watched that game, he was the young man that kept doing the gun signal. He did a taunt where he would almost be like shooting somebody, kind of like John Morant.
Morant.
And nobody could coach him. And so I get it that there's personal responsibility, and this ties into what we've talked about for the last 20 minutes. Without the ability or the license of grown men to be mentors and to show tough love and to grab a kid by the collar and say, come here, you're acting up, because there's always the threat that that kid can just transfer to your rival. I do think that the system and the lack of guidance, which plays in together, I'm not saying it's the sole reason, but I do think it played a part in perhaps Kyren Lacy never getting back on a straight road.
I think that's a great point. Great way to tie the entire conversation together. Thank you, Steve. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. Thank you guys for watching. We'll play tomorrow. We'll see you tomorrow.
Waiting for the countdown, coming off the breakdown, standing in line for freedom. Looking for a breakout, feeling like a standoff, nothing in life like freedom. Came like a fighter, striking like a ladder, making all this moves for freedom. I want freedom. No negotiation, my sister, no relation. We all just wanna have freedom. Sitting on the corner, never been alone. I'm breaking my back for freedom. Blessed, we are living, get back. We are receiving, all deceiving. We all wanna be free.